When you work at a charity shop, you quickly become friendly with some screws, especially if it's a children's charity shop. A number of fake walkie talkies, little CRRC cars, and whatever battery operated bullshit I had to take apart, with the help of my grubby fingers and a cheap screwdriver. Don't wish to try and count that yet. Every charity shop also has the same problem. Getting a whole load of random rubbish donated by someone with plastered smiles on their faces. It was the kind of stuff that was meant for the skips and tips. Things that bin men should pick up, not volunteers who were going to be paid for any meaninglessly amount of wipe off dried feces from a baby's high chair. I could count a number of high chairs I have wiped dried fluids off. It was 5. One, it wasn't so bad, and the other 4 may as well have been made of a mixture of saliva and baby food poo, because you couldn't really see any of the material underneath it. Yet, this story is not about how I wiped the shit off of high chairs. It's a horror story for another time. This is the story of a rattling inside of a toy walkie-talkie. I have to admit, if someone was battery operated, I would usually do more than I needed to do. By that, I would take apart the toy myself, seeing how it worked inside. The only procedure I really had to was pop open the battery compartment, take out any batteries, and test the toy to see if it worked. If it blinked or flickered or made a noise, I would price it and then put it on the shelf. If it didn't, I would throw it out in the bin. Yet I found some old fascination in it, actually taking the things apart and seeing how they worked from the inside. I actually like that in most things, knowing on how they worked. Name something, and I could probably love to hear or see how it worked. Digestive systems, walkie-talkies, cars, bombs, rifles, anything at all. I loved learning how they work and how they were built, but I'm rather surprised I was never talked to by a police officer or government official. For the amount of time I spent researching improvised weaponry, reading through the gunsmithing guides, and learning how to make bombs for a cheap thrill of education, I would have thought I would have been put on the watch list. Luckily, I don't think I am. So as I was saying, I took the toys apart and looked at the circuits, seeing on how they were functionated. It wasn't over scientific, but it was more Victorian. The Victorian way of cutting into something to open, just to find out how it works, and always in my mind. I knew that from a little motherboard, if the wire was connected to a speaker, the toy should probably play music or speak a line. I didn't know how the audio systems work or how any of them really worked. Someone could have told me that the audio was just put into a little boards and other ways of witches. I could probably have to believe you. I enjoyed most of seeing the wires and seeing how the toys worked. So in this case, an older man donated a bag of toys. There wasn't really anything bad about him. He did, however, had an old look on about him. He was hunched over old man. His appearance hadn't been more common with the goblin that of a person. His wrinkles looked like they were saturated from an older man, and his hair was wispy white mold, like he was psychic living in a caravan. Yet I've seen worse. I gladly accepted the bag, giving him an aggravated smile and a thank you. Grabbing the carrier bag, I placed it behind the desk and served to a few customers. When the shop got quiet, everyone having either left what they came for it to disappear from sight, I brought back into the desk and poured onto the table. It was junk mostly. Not bad junk, just loads of junk that most people wouldn't want their children to play with. Old toys that looked so old that they could probably have lead paint on. Things that looked more capable of housing weapons than happy times with the children. Yet, in the mixture of old toys, there were a few oddities. One of them was being a bloody knife from a Fireman Sam toy walkie-talkie. The knife was a switchblade, kind of looked like a leather jacket wearing thugs would hold up to someone and with a click of the button, flick out the blade, telling them to shut up. It was one of those, even if the ironic black colors, although the thoughts of reporting it to the manager, and there the police came out of mind. It isn't always the mind of volunteers will be the most law-abiding. Quite frankly, most volunteers will pick up a few things in pockets for themselves. It was moral, only things taken that were designed in the bin. It was how I got my brother in his birthday present with a little confident flag by quickly nabbing him in before it was handed in the bag. So, like an idiot, I pocketed the switchblade in the back of my jeans. I have to admit, when I felt the pressing the button against me, I had to flip the blade around in my pocket. I was stupid, but also fearful. I didn't want the image of my own ass sending me to the hospital by a stabbing in the leg plaguing my mind all day. So I had to flip it. Then came the walkie talkie. It was a strange piece of kit, especially due to the surroundings. It was surrounded by toys that looked like they would very much belong to a Victorian child. Yet amongst all of them was this. For those who don't know, Google describes it as a show like this: follows the adventures of the title hero and his colleagues as they protect citizens of the Welsh town Pontypandy. I did watch it when I was young, and I watched it on an occasion when I had to babysit my younger cousins. So I was aware of the smiling faced Afridi fireman, yet it twinged me as odd as it buried amongst the other things. I picked it up and I pressed one of the colorful buttons. It sounded off proudly, not about rescuing the cat from the tree, yet I felt as weight was moving inside. Carefully I shook, and there was a shift inside, a weight that couldn't explain. You could easily feel it if you moved it from side to side. Keeping a closer eye on the door to the back room, I got one of the screwdrivers from under the desk and flipped the walkie-talkie over. The first thing I noticed is that the screws were reversed, and in the lefty wasn't loose and righty wasn't tight. It was flipped in reverse. The other thing I found the screws was cheap. By cheap, what I mean, I managed to scrape off the warped screws, and I simply turning them with the screwdriver. Eventually, I peeled off the deformed screws to get what I really needed. The toy was hard to pry open, but despite the lack of screws, I checked to see if I had forgotten some hidden secret screw, but I hadn't. Eventually, I just simply aimed at the table with a careful precaution, whacked the walkie-talkie against it, hoping that I had hit the split in the middle. Luckily, it had worked, and one half of the walkie-talkie shifted upwards. Digging into my nails, I ripped the front of the walkie-talkie off. As I did, there was a long hole of yellow glue, and it was really super glue by the looks of it. The glue sticks don't look hardened yet. Sitting on the center of it all was there a USB stick. Although many would think that it was a massive USB, like a stick, it wasn't. It was barely the size of my thumb. Rattling the walkie-talkie, the USB fell onto the desk, peeling off the protective corn cover. I could see that it wasn't damaged by any sort of glue. My brain thudded, telling me that I would have to report this to the police. Despite the switchblade incident earlier, a USB hidden with the children's toys felt like somehow worse. Usually people hide things in attics, locked in safes, or something else. Yet this guy had hidden whatever it was, a children's toy. A children's toy that would either be picked up and sold and disappear into the mass of the general public, or being thrown around in the charity shop until someone either throws it away or it disappears into the general public of God knows where. Thoughts swam in my mind as I dug through the operations. Weapons deals, terrorist plans, and writings. All horrible ideas then swam beyond my eyes, poking at the nerves within my head. Soon my morals turned into static as my mind slowly sank into blissful oblation, my thoughts disappearing into quiet mental ramblings. As I listened to the static, I asked my body of what slowly became weightless. I listened to my body and the static as my body was slowly turning numb to it all, like a wave of pins and needles that were landing on my skin, yet in a soft, soothing way. Yet my morals resurfaced. As deep thoughts crushed into me like a weight of iron, I soon tried to drive away the static. The moralistic static soon shuts off, silencing the while the whole USB passed into my pocket. The rest of the day was inventable. I spent in it, recalling how I brought an 8mm camera from the shop. There was nothing wrong with the camera. It worked perfectly, as far as I could tell. All I know is that when I wound it up and pushed the switch in front of it, It made a whirling sound, and a little pole thing span inside when I popped it up and pressed down on the switch. Whirling like if it was a film projector. It sounded wonderful. It even had a little sight aiming at the lenses. It looked like if something from an old sci-fi film. There were 3 separate rectangles, all with each other like a Russian nesting doll. The largest was green, the medium was red, and the last was the smallest was yellow. Aiming inside the charity shop, I saw its slate worked perfectly. The charity shop wasn't allowed to sell it to the public, so as a worker, I brought it up for £2 and I went on my way. It wasn't really it was a big bonus working at the charity shop, but all the stuff in the back. Items that were in the shop legally can't sell. Truly amazing the kind of stuff you could buy. I was snapped out of the dream by the manager tapping me on the shoulder. She was a polite woman. She looked like one of those 50 wives that you saw in the old advertisers for crack, yet she was still slightly larger than one of those girls. Her hair was ginger and she had freckles all over her face. To be honest, if you plopped in her in Ireland, they would recognize the differences in the scenery. I have to admit, though, I didn't join the job for it. I did end up having a thing for her. Sadly enough, nothing ever happened because in real life, it wasn't some romance novel, and even if it was, I was not the man for who welded the fancy cars and the abs that could grate the cheese. She told me that I have left 5 minutes ago, giving a stupid and then I wandered home with the hands in my jean pockets. When I got home, there was no one there. A note tabbed to my wall told me that they had gone out, going to do some antique shopping in the middle of nowhere. My brother wasn't in either. I couldn't hear him shouting some insane nonsense at his console, so I knew that going upstairs, I turned onto the landing, and then there was 2 doors, one to my bedroom and one to my brother's. I could see in his room and his laptop was on, chugging away as it loaded something. Carefully, I pulled out the USB out of my pocket and went to his room. Sitting on his bed, I brought up the laptop on my lap, carefully plugged in the USB in it. It fired up, flashing a few layers of green until it was complete. It was finished and I scanned over for viruses. Nothing came of it. From everything I had heard about hackers and their little gifts, I thought that I would see a few hundred window pop-ups, extracting from whatever credit cards or pieces of information my brother had left stupidly on his computer. Yet nothing happened. The laptop just sat there, waiting for something for me to do. I clicked on the little button and it said to safely extract the USB and slowly pulled the stick away from the slot. Placing the laptop on the bed, I wandered into my room and held down the button on my PC. The large brick computer then churned to life, spewing out guts and the winds from its fans. The monitor flared up with a rotating logo, and a small number popped in, quickly turning away from my 0 and to 100 without much of a moment's notice. As the screen planted itself onto my desktop, it loaded up the wallpaper. The little image of Union Jack, it was nothing fancy. It was just simply a picture that meant well to me. Carefully, I sat in my desk chair and slotted up the USB in. The stick fired up. It went through its prayers before it was letting me in. I double-clicked the folder and opened it up, and there was a text file, and it was executable. The text file simply read 1711. The executable was called the Kite. The twinges of the guilt came to my mind again. Every thought of calling the police reiterated behind my eyes like mental vomit. I flickered my cursor over towards the file text and I popped it open. The text file was actually made of a copy that let me just post it there. I never discovered what this meant since I couldn't understand what it meant. But even when I opened the file for the first time, I knew that it wasn't coding and that I had seen some coding before. Popping up the files of the programs using the notepad, coding looked a bit random, using random symbols, question marks, and whatever else the keyboard will allow. It mashed together into a strong language that only the computer could not understand. Yet this wasn't coding. I could tell because this was some sort of secret language. The commas and full stops, they all seemed to come from the complete sentences of gibberish and nonsense. For whole minutes, I just stared at it, yet couldn't work out any single piece of it. The only thing I could really have thought of was the S meant the I, and those letters instantly capitalized. From what, though, I still had no idea what the paragraph meant. Ideas then poured in my head of what it all could mean. It could be a cry for help, a man having gone insane, thinking that his last hope was some mysterious person from a charity shop. However, the ideas was confession and to murder and death. They were not totally out of my mind. The fluid of these dark thoughts mixed together, like the blood mixing into seawater. As my thoughts deepened, becoming unneeded static to my logic, I closed the text document, letting it sit on the taskbar like a fat slug. My thoughts turned into subconscious, displeased to reopen it. If I reopened it, I would find out what it meant. What it all meant, I could discover if this man needed help. My thoughts raced back to the ideas of Zodiac Killer, a man who had used the symbols to his own murderers. This first of those letters were decoded by the maths teacher and his wife, all simply looking for clues. Words that had double letters such as the words kill. They decoded the entirety of the letter, which led to the police on the goose chase after the killer decided to decode his letters at the very point imaginable. I thought that, thinking to myself that I could have done the same if I had the commitment. I could have just sat down and ate my breakfast over a glass of orange juice and toast. Decoded the letter, I could have helped the police on their case. As I thought about it, my thoughts unwound against me, turning hostile. They told me that my job would be easier than theirs. Chipper is easier, and it was simple letter replacement. I could work it out with a Google search, most likely. These thoughts swam through my eyes, letting me sit frozen in my chair. My mind resurfaced as the thoughts of what the text could mean, all the possibilities and even some impossibilities of what could have meant. I wanted to find comfort knowing what that text meant. People find comfort in things they would understand. A rock star is comfortable with drugs, rock and roll, and etc., while a Christian preacher would hide in fear, shouting himself as he believes is wrong and healthy with a dose of religious thought. Comfort is something humans need to survive. I theorize it goes food, water, shelter, and comfort. Comfort is to make sure you don't go insane and start seeing things. To help ease myself out of my anxiety, I helped myself with some creepy videos on the internet. The kind about how those top lists of creepy people that once lived in Japan, and other kinds like that. Have you ever wondered why those people are morbid? I mean, for me, I like feeling unsettled. It's like odd form of anxiety that is actually stimulating to me. It doesn't make me feel bad, it just makes me feel good. I did get a charge out of it. I think it's also because I like the idea of being honest and real. I feel that most of the happy things that are casually told us or shown to us, whatever screen we prefer to view them, as though they're actually real, or at the very least not. I believe morbid curiosity stems from what everyone wants out of a human. Honestly, to find such greater honesty and darker side as well as more real, more uncut and less polished. I often find myself recording serial killer documentaries and Googling stories of plane crashes and people who have accidentally let slip-ups to. Looks at me, and I had some evil creature that loves the stuff, and that I kill them on the spot if they knew I wouldn't scream. Then again, I shouldn't be able to going around telling people about how awesome plane crashes, but are sometimes I let a few slip-up lines, and then I get to myself down to a deep questioning of my mental health. Yet as the videos tapered off, I got into my second favorite thing, notes. My family barged into the house as I read some of the firsts. I read the oddly one that hit me home was The Single Man. He was 44 and read, "Dear anyone who reads this, It may not seem like with my head blown off my head, but I'm happier than I'm ever will been. I have done everything that I could, and now that I'm bored, I am unhappy with what I have now. I'm going over to see what I can on the other side. God bless you all. John Richardson. I snorted out a laugh from my nose, thinking of my family rampaging downstairs. An instructive thought told me to go downstairs and show them the note. Another told me just to go and guess what? Blow my brains out with a pistol? I don't own a pistol. Another more rational thought told me that to go back to reading it until I got bored. My brain told me all those times, and I thought I was bored of my life, that I was done everything, and I could have been bothered to. As my thoughts died down, though, I looked back at the file explorer sitting on my taskbar. I brought it up and saw the Kite sitting there, licking my lips. I clicked on it. A window flashed up, found in darkness, and it soon slipped to a rectangular screen. A pixelated fire axe atop to the firefighter yellow background next to it. A singular button with the word play on it. Despite those features, there was nothing else on the windows. It was just that, a fire axe and a play button. Despite myself, I clicked the play button, and a small jingle played, like a theme song running through a chiptune machine. The screen then faded to black, and a cross-section of fire station popped into view. It looked like it was designed from the ground up to look up something like SNES. It was like Castlevania, yet it replaced its murky browns and greens for its bright reds and yellows. There was a set of spiraling up the stairs to a sleeping area, and connected to that room, there was a small kitchen. A pole that is positioned in the sleeping room that was once down was a garage that housed a single fire engine. Despite the show it must have been based on, the fire engines was wonderful in detail. Each cabinet, hinge, and shine was beautifully remindered, giving it a crisp look. There were even posters that posted on the side of the fire engines, warning people to check their fire detectors. After a moment, the camera shook, and suddenly a man appeared from the sleeping area. It was hard to tell who he was, but it was easy to tell that he was a firefighter. He wore the yellow hat, an oxygen tank, and everything else, but despite being inside, a screen flashed white for a split second, and on the screen it returned. Experimentally, I pressed down on the D key, and the man sprinted right towards the kitchen. I gave a smile and continued on. I ran over to the pole, and a yellow arrow flashed above it, pressing S. The firefighter slid down the pole, landing with a cartoonish thud on the ground. As he got himself off the pole, standing next to the doors of the fire engine, a woman ran into the fire station. The text box appeared reading, "Miss Taswell, oh goodness, Fireman Sam. There is a fire at the old French painter's house. You have to help him before his paintings burn." My mind recalled the memories of watching this show, but I never recalled an episode like that. Most of them were about public relations or rescuing cats from trees. I don't think there ever was a French character in the show at all. Another text box popped up. "Sam, no worries, Miss Taswell. I'm on it." As the character stood there awkwardly, an arrow appeared by the fire engine. I pressed W, and Sam lurched forward, opening the door and getting inside. It was a strange animation, almost like the engine pulled him in, instead of the other way around. Beyond the control, the fire engine started up and rolled out of the station. The screen flickered to a loading screen, showing the fire engine sprinting towards the machine somewhere. The background a blur, like the engine had broke through the hyperspace. Eventually, it faded to black. The scene then came back from the engine room and had stopped outside of a burning building. Inside the window was a man throwing his arms, and as the flames licked up the scene behind him. I moved my character around until eventually another arrow popped up and I pushed W, and the man jumped out from the window. Slamming my character, he staggered back, holding the man like if he was drunk, before setting him on the floor. "Mr. Foragin, oh, thank you, Sam. Yet my paintings are still inside. Can you save them?" Instead of being a normal person and telling Mr. Foragin to go to hell, Sam responded by not talking, and without my control, running into the open door. Inside, everything was burning, and all around the pedestals were completely, yet hidden paintings. They were hidden beyond pixels. Running up to one, the game told me to press E, and I did, and the detailed screen was brought up. Grubby gloves gripped around the painting. The canvas depicted a woman standing outside of a cinema. The woman was naked except for a belt running around her waist and holding a rifle magazines on her shoulder. Of course, was aiming at the sky, an M16 straight out of a Vietnam film. A text box just below appeared. Sam, Jesus, this woman is French. I thought I had never noticed that the woman at the Amazon jungle, and just under her waist, a caption below it appeared, N for throw it outside, or Y for letting it burn. Thinking it back to my achievement scrounging days, I pressed N, chucking it outside. The scene then returned to the burning building, and I ran to another painting. Pressing E, I picked it up in my hands. Detailed painting on the crucifixion of Christ, yet upon his arm there was an armband of a yellow star. My thoughts on my history classes have resurfaced. N for throw it outside, or Y for letting it burn. I threw it outside. Again, I ran to another painting and picked it up. A scene from America. It looked like Washington, D.C. It was almost humorous. It was a large statue of Abraham Lincoln, leaning from his chair in, with an outstretched head, shaking his hands with Martin Luther King. A same option appeared. Y for let it burn, or N for throw it outside. Again, it was given back to the painter. I ransacked out of the room, finding paintings of all different things. Two tightened hands, made of all the flags in the world, shaking them for Y for letting them burn, or N for throwing them outside. A dinner when everyone was eating vegetables and sitting like a dog with them was a cow. A picture of a wedding, a white woman, men and a black woman smiling together. Eventually I came upon the last painting, a hidden a trap. It was hard to find as it was obscured. Hiding in the background, I peeled off the tarp, picked up the painting. It was a large painting, depicting a rally. It was likely being lifted up in the march to see 1,000 men, and in front of that march was shouting. Hitler seemed to be more muscular and tall and handsome than I remembered from the pictures. Then again, I was given the option. I had almost hit N before I released my mind off the game, hitting Y instead. I smiled as I finished the task. The scene returned to the house that had been engulfed in the flames. Quickly, I left the house and was greeted outside the scene. Other firefighters had joined, using the fire engine to battle the flames with hoses and such. Yet the French painter was gone, and speckles of blood on the ground. Quickly, I followed it. It was a massive scene. It led to an alleyway, and through an arrow appeared. Pressing down on the W key, I was led into the hallway. The French painter was against the wall, held up in the bald thug. The thug hit the painter on the nose, and blood shooting down his shirt. Another appeared from the shadows and pulled a pistol from his jacket, blowing his brains out onto the wall. They turned towards me and started to run at me. Quickly, I backed out of the alley and threw my character towards the fire engine. The only thing that made the arrow appear was the burning house. As the thugs appeared from the alleyway, I took my chance and ducked through the burning house. The scene changed, and I made Sam run back to the room. Quickly, he slammed the door against the arrow appeared. Curious, I hit the key, and the character threw upon the door. Disappearing into it, it was a cellar, and in the middle of it was a hatch. I ran over to the hatch and hit the key, and it let me inside. He grabbed it with one hand and lifted up. Quickly, he reached for his other hand down and lifted to make sure that there wasn't thrown to the floor. As he lifted, the hinges groaning with a heavy sound. The metal slid smoothly, and eventually, it smacked itself on the floor. It released an unholy bang, filled the clear with its echo. He grabbed the ladder that was connected to the revealed tunnel and climbed down. I wondered where the hell I was going, but I didn't want my character to have to run through the armed thugs, so I let him disappear down the ladder. Eventually he reached to the bottom and found himself a hall and a door. A large metal door with a handle. He walked over to it with the same motion, slowly grabbed by the door handle, and he threw it open. There was nothing, just a beeping server in a polished metal room. A laptop looking stood out in front of the wall. walking in, it seemed to have stared at all uncomfortably. The door slammed behind him. He walked towards and tapped on the keyboard. The scene then changed, and I was greeted by a detailed look. And at the laptop, the character simply broke through the passwords and accounts. A pixelated video flashed up on the screen, like I was looking through the eyes of the soldier. He rested his arm on top of the tank. A large machine gun pointed up at the skies as his arm rested on it. There was a fire station and a gaping hole in its center, smoke blowing out like a chimney. People hung off the steel and poke out in different angles. Some people whole, some people in pieces. A man hung down. His upper body was torn apart, strips of flesh hanging from his exposed muzzle and fat. He dangled off the edge of the building with his intestines loosely fallen from his guts, decorating his bloody corpse like a Christmas tree tinsel. A woman just stood at the side of the hole and was crying at the stare at the man. Another video flashed up, and in its eyes it was another soldier, and I could see 3 soldiers opening the fire of their rifles. It was the only line of the woman of children. It looked as if they were waiting for the post office. They were all shredded by bullets, slumping against the wall from the force. They were bleeding, creating pools. The whirly guts were spread all around the floor. A firecracker blew up in the minced meat. The smile on the soldiers' faces were stained with droplets of blood. Behind my character, I heard the click of a pistol. The laptop was covered in blood. Then the text appeared, "Game over." I shrugged and got up, going to the toilet. When I came back, the game had crashed into a bizarre screen of just glitches and pixels, broken beyond repair. Just wondering if anyone know where to find this game. I want to give it to my friend for his birthday. Well, this was the Kite game written by NuclearCorpus. My final thoughts on this story. Well, I honestly never thought I would run into this creepypasta, but I decided to go ahead and, do a review on this story and narrate this because I honestly saw Silver Story's narration on this, and I thought it was a pretty good story. I mean, the fact that it involves, someone ended up getting a USB and ends up coming across this really strange game that they've never heard of before. I mean, it's a pretty good concept, and I really have to say, yeah, despite the fact that there was a few cliches in this story, I honestly do find this to be a pretty good one. Like, I like the sentence structuring of the story, and the grammar is pretty good too. So I was able to read this story with no problems at all. It's a very well made and awesome story. So there's definitely a really good time and effort when I read this story because I never heard of this story until just recently. So, anyways, with that being the case and that being said, I thought it was a really great story. I honestly thought it was neat. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good concept in that. I mean, yeah, there were a few cliches in this story, but I still thought it was pretty neat for what the story was. I mean, a person discovering this lost game or something. It's honestly a pretty good concept. Now, I do know that it is cliched. Well, there are a few cliches in this story, but it works out pretty good. And I could really say that the author did try to make something new, so I'm willing to give it benefit of the doubt that the author did his best to make something new. And that's something I really gotta say. It's a pretty awesome story. It's definitely well made, and I mean, I definitely could see this being very good potential to be a really damn awesome story. Now, this is on the regular Creepypasta wiki for any of you guys are wondering, and I recommend reading this if you haven't. It's a pretty good story. So, with that being the case and that being said, it has a pretty good concept in that, and I gotta thank the author for writing this story. This was pretty awesome. They did a pretty good job with this story. So, with that being said and that being the case, this is just simply my own personal opinion. And if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is just simply my own personal thoughts. I'm gonna give this story a 10 out of 10. Despite the cliches, which I am willing to give them a pass because, well, it's a really well made story, and there's definitely a lot of time and effort into it, so there's definitely that. So, yeah. Anyways, with that being the case and with that being said, what did you guys personally think of this story? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me what your thoughts are down in the comments below because I personally would like to hear what you guys think. I'm the Lion Queen. I want to thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're brand new here to my channel, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell for notifications when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.